The champagne tower was supposed to be the centerpiece, a glittering, cascading monument to everything I'd sacrificed for. 3 years of 18-hour days, begging investors for scraps, swallowing every no like it was just another pill to keep me going. I'd pictured it 100 times. My parents finally looking at me the way they looked at Camilla, their eyes wide with something like pride, maybe even awe. Instead, I stood there alone, watching condensation slide down the glass like tears no one would ever see me shed. The venue staff kept glancing at me, their pity poorly disguised. "Should we start pouring?" one asked, holding a bottle of something expensive I'd chosen specifically because my father once mentioned liking it. I shook my head. The RSVPs had been clear enough. Regretfully, declines from my parents. LOL busy from Camilla. But some stupid, stubborn part of me had still hoped. Right up until my phone buzzed with a notification, a tagged photo of the 3 of them at the hospital, Camilla's ankle wrapped in what looked like enough gauze to mummify a small animal. The caption, "Family emergency, nothing like a scare to remind you what matters." I zoomed in. My mother's hand was clasped around Camilla's, her thumb rubbing circles like she was soothing a war veteran. My father hovered behind them, his face the picture of concern. I swiped to the next story, Camilla grinning through a wince as a nurse handed her what looked like a best patient sticker. I laughed. Not the sharp, bitter laugh you'd expect, but something quieter. Defeated. Because of course. 6 months ago, I'd been in the ER with pneumonia. My fever so high the nurse kept checking my pulse like she thought I might vanish between blinks. When I called my mother, her sigh crackled through the phone. "Can't you just take an Uber home?" Now, here was Camilla, milking a sprained ankle like it was a goddamn Shakespearean tragedy, and our parents were playing the role of devoted audience. I reached out and plucked a single glass from the tower. The champagne was warm, flat. I drank it anyway. Around me, the few colleagues who'd shown up shuffled awkwardly. Someone cleared their throat. Maybe they got held up in traffic? I didn't answer. What was there to say? That traffic had never stopped them from making it to Camilla's ballet recitals, her gallery openings, her top 30 under 30 brunches. That the only thing holding them up was the gravitational pull of her drama, the way the universe itself bent to make sure Camilla was the sun, and the rest of us just orbiting debris. The staff started packing up the untouched hors d'oeuvres. I let them, watched as they dismantled the tower, glass by glass, until all that was left was a sticky ring on the tablecloth. A stain no one would remember by tomorrow. I pocketed my speech, the one I'd rewritten 7 times, the one that mentioned my parents in the thank yous like some pathetic plea for acknowledgement, and walked out. The cold air hit my face like a slap. Good. Let it sting. Let it remind me this was the last time I'd freeze myself into something fragile, just so they'd have the pleasure of watching me shatter. Somewhere behind me, a glass shattered anyway. I didn't look back. I should have known better. That's what stings the most. Not their absence at the launch, but the fact that I saw it coming from miles away and still let myself hope. The memory hits me like a rogue wave as I'm stuffing my suitcase with thermal gear. That night, 6 months ago when I woke up drowning. Not in water, but in my own lungs, each breath a wet, crackling struggle. I managed to call an ambulance, but when the EMTs asked who they should notify, I gave them my mother's number out of pure reflex. Some pathetic, childlike part of me still believed she'd come running. Her voice through the phone was thick with sleep. "What do you want me to do about it?" A pause, then, sharper. "You're a grown woman. Figure it out." The hospital lights were too bright, the ER too loud, but the worst part was the couple across from me. A girl my age with her mother stroking her hair, murmuring, "I've got you." I turned my face to the wall and counted the ceiling tiles until the nurses pumped me full of antibiotics and sent me home in a cab. That was a Tuesday. On Friday, Camilla posted a tearful Instagram story about breaking a nail during her manicure. Our mother commented within minutes, "My poor baby, let me bring you soup." I wish I could say that was the moment I snapped. But the truth is, I'd been collecting these little betrayals like shards of glass in my pockets for years. There was my college graduation, where my father spent the entire ceremony filming Camilla's vlog intro in the bleachers. The time I won the regional science fair, only to find they'd left early to catch Camilla's very important high school cheerleading exhibition. The way every family dinner became an impromptu focus group for Camilla's latest brand collab, while my work at Polaris was met with vague nods and immediate subject changes. But the real knife twist. 2 weeks before my launch, when I overheard my father on the phone with his golf buddy, "Camilla's really going places. The other one, smart, sure, but she's got no spark. Just grinds away in that depressing little office." I stood there in the hallway, clutching the prototype that would have cut their energy bills in half, and realised something awful. They didn't just prefer Camilla, they were embarrassed by me. My quiet determination and my refusal to perform gratitude for their crumbs of attention, my very existence as a reminder that parenting isn't about applause, it's about showing up. That's when I started drafting the sale documents for my shares. That's when I began researching Antarctic research stations. That's when I finally understood. They'd never choose me. So now? I wouldn't give them the chance. The memory fades as I zip my suitcase shut. Outside my window, the first snow of winter begins to fall. Funny how endings can look so much like beginnings. The lawyer's office smelled like mahogany and regret. I crossed my legs in the stiff leather chair, watching as Mr. Calloway adjusted his glasses and slid the final contract across the desk. His pen hovered over the signature line like a vulture circling. "Last chance to reconsider," he said, in that tone people use when they think you're about to jump off a cliff. "You built Polaris from nothing. These patents are your life's work." I took the pen. The weight of it felt different this time. Not a tool for creating, but a detonator. "Exactly," I said and signed. The clauses were beautiful in their brutality. The company could keep the name, the office plants, the letterhead. But my designs, the core innovations that made Polaris actually valuable, those came with me, buried in subsection 14. B was the real poison pill. Any attempt to replicate my work would trigger immediate patent litigation, so vicious it would bankrupt them within months. My father called before the ink was dry. "What the hell is this?" His voice crackled through the speaker, all fury and no remorse. "We had plans for those patents." I watched a snowplow grind past the window, clearing a path through the slush. "Funny," I said. "I don't recall being included in those plans." Silence. Then the inevitable pivot. "Your mother's beside herself." A laugh escaped me, sharp and unplanned. "Is she, or is she too busy picking out Camilla's next spa day?" The line went dead. Perfect. I spent the next 24 hours methodically erasing myself. Bank accounts transferred, emails forwarded, the framed photo of us at Disneyland, the one where I'm barely visible behind Camilla's giant Mickey ears, went straight into the shredder. When the realtor came to list my apartment, she paused at the empty walls. Running towards something or away, I handed her the keys. Yes. The ticket counter at the airport was deserted at 4 a.m. The agent blinked at my destination. "McMurdo Station? That's unusual." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I hear the views are incredible." As the plane lifted off, I pressed my forehead to the window. The city lights shrank into pinpricks, then vanished altogether. Somewhere down there, my father was probably screaming at some poor junior executive. My mother was likely crying in that performative way she did at Camilla's school plays. Camilla herself? Probably already drafting a family crisis post for her followers. But up here? Silence. I closed my eyes as we pierced the cloud cover. Let them burn it all down without me. I was headed somewhere colder, cleaner, where the ice didn't care about your family name, your failures, or how loudly you could scream for attention. It wasn't running away. It was a controlled detonation. The cold didn't hit me all at once. It crept in like a slow-acting poison, seeping through my thermal layers, my skin, my bones, until I wasn't sure where my body ended and the ice began. McMurdo Station looked like something out of a dystopian film. A cluster of industrial buildings clinging to the edge of nowhere, their metal skeletons groaning under the weight of endless wind. The air smelled like diesel and something sharper, something untouched by human hands. First-timer, a woman in a parka so thick she looked like a walking sleeping bag, tossed me a survival kit. Her name tag read, Dana Glaciologist, 7 seasons. I fumbled the catch. My fingers, even in gloves, moved like they'd been dipped in molasses. "You'll get used to it," she said, though her smirk suggested she didn't believe that. "Or you won't. Either way, the ice decides." They gave me 10 minutes to drop my bags in the dorm, a metal box barely bigger than a prison cell, before orientation. The bunk above mine was plastered with photos of some researcher's dog. I touched the edge of one, a golden retriever mid-leap, and felt something crack in my chest. No one here knew about Polaris. No one cared about Camilla. My past was just dead weight, and Antarctica had a way of stripping away anything unnecessary. The briefing room was all scuffed linoleum and bad coffee. A grizzled man with a beard that could house small wildlife slapped a map onto the table. "Rule 1, he barked. "Respect the whiteout. It'll kill you faster than your own stupidity." I learned the rhythms fast. How to check for frostbite in the mirror every morning. Nose, cheeks, fingertips. How to pee in a bottle when going outside meant risking hypothermia. How silence here wasn't empty, it was alive, pressing against your eardrums until you swore you could hear your own blood moving. My job was maintaining the solar arrays that kept the station running. It was brutal work, fingers cramping around tools that stuck to skin, but there was a purity to it. No investors to charm, no family to disappoint. Just the simple equation of effort versus survival. One night, caught in a sudden storm, I had to crawl back to base by following the guide ropes, inch by agonizing inch. The wind screamed like a living thing, and for one terrifying moment, I understood. This place could erase me without a trace. When I finally collapsed inside, Dana tossed me a towel. "Congratulations," she said. "Now you're one of us." I pressed the towel to my frozen face. The warmth stung. Outside, the storm raged on. Somewhere beyond it, my old life was still happening. Shareholder meetings and family dinners and Camilla's endless thirst for applause. But here, I was just another body against the ice. And for the first time in years, that was enough. It started with a cracked diode panel, just another routine maintenance check until the storm rolled in faster than predicted, turning what should have been a 15-minute repair into an hour-long battle against the elements. I didn't notice the camera crew at first, too focused on keeping my wrench from becoming a frozen projectile as 50-knot winds tried to peel me off the solar array's service platform. The documentary team had come to film penguin migrations. Instead, they got footage of me jury-rigging a power relay with spare parts and sheer stubbornness, my parka hood crusted with ice, breath coming in visible gasps between shouted technical commands to the team inside via radio. The shot they'd later call iconic showed me straddling the array's frame like some mad engineer-whale hybrid, backlit by the eerie green glow of the aurora australis. When the storm finally passed, the lead producer shoved a release form in my face. "For background shots," he assured me. I signed without reading, too exhausted to care about my wind-burned face becoming someone's establishing shot. 3 weeks later, the internet exploded. The documentary's trailer dropped with me as its centerpiece. Not the penguins, not the sweeping glacial vistas, Me swearing creatively in 3 languages while wrestling with frozen components. The clip went viral under the hashtag #IceQueenEngineer. Emails started pouring into the station's shared inbox, interview requests, speaking engagements, a particularly persistent TED Talk coordinator who somehow got my personal satellite number. The station manager pinned them all to the communal bulletin board with increasing exasperation, my growing notoriety disrupting the delicate isolation we all depended on. Then came the messages from home. First, a forwarded news article from my former assistant. Disgraced founder thrives at world's end. Then, LinkedIn connection requests from every investor who'd turned me down. Finally, the voicemails, my father's clipped corporate tone giving way to something unfamiliar. Or, we saw the coverage. Your mother thinks you should consider monetizing this attention. The kicker arrived via certified mail, a printout of Camilla's latest Instagram story, her posing with a hastily purchased Antarctica Strong sweatshirt, caption reading, "So proud of my genius sister. Always knew she'd change the world, #family. First, I burned it in the waste incinerator, watching synthetic fibres curl into acrid smoke. The irony was almost beautiful. They'd spent years treating my work as an embarrassing hobby. But now that strangers cared, suddenly I was worth claiming." Dana found me staring at the ashes. "Fame's a weird beast down here," she said, handing me a flask. "Either it breaks you or makes you stranger." I took a swig, letting the whiskey burn away the bitter taste in my mouth. The station's generators hummed steadily in the background, powered by my repairs, running on my terms. Outside, the endless white stretched to forever. For the first time, I understood. This wasn't just escape. It was reinvention. And the world, it seemed, was finally ready to see me on my own terms. The first call came through the station's emergency line at 3:17 a.m. McMurdo time, a hysterical blur of my mother's voice cutting through static, demanding to know why I wasn't answering my personal phone. I pictured her perfectly manicured fingers stabbing at her iPhone screen, her designer silk robe fluttering as she paced their marble-floored foyer. "We've been worried sick," she shrieked, as if I were a teenager who'd missed curfew, not a grown woman who'd deliberately vanished off the grid. I let the silence stretch until it grew teeth. "Well?" "The satellite phone's for emergencies," I said, watching my breath fog in the frozen air of the comms room. "Is someone dying?" A beat, then quieter. "Your father's under a lot of stress." Translation. Polaris was floundering without my patents. Investors were jumping ship. The media had started asking uncomfortable questions about why their visionary founder had fled to the literal end of the earth. Camilla's attempt at damage control arrived in the form of a 2,0,0,0-word Vanity Fair profile. The sister, left in the cold, painted her as the heartbroken family peacekeeper. The accompanying photo spread showed her sitting wistfully by a fireplace, my childhood photos arranged beside her like a shrine. Never mind that half were actually pictures of her, with me awkwardly cropped into the frame's edge. Then came my father's emails, subject lines shifting from urgent family matter to business proposal to finally, you win. Attached were buyout offers with more zeros than I'd ever seen in my life. I archived them unread. The breaking point came via a surprise video call. My father's face filled the grainy monitor, his custom-tailored suit jacket hanging looser than I remembered. Behind him, our family home's great room looked unnaturally still. No Camilla staging content, no assistants rushing about. Just my mother hovering at the edge of the frame, her smile strained. "We miss you," he said with the cadence of a man reading from a hostage negotiator's script. I almost admired the performance, the way his jaw twitched when I didn't respond, how his eyes darted to something off screen, likely a list of talking points prepared by some crisis PR firm. "The board's willing to reinstate you as CEO," he blurted. "Full creative control, your name on the door." Outside, the wind howled against the station's walls. Somewhere beneath the ice, a continent's worth of ancient pressure shifted imperceptibly. "Too late," I said, and reached for the disconnect button. "Wait!" My mother's hand shot into frame. "What about your sister's wedding?" I laughed, a real unguarded sound that startled even me. The date had been set for months. Camilla's intimate destination ceremony in Bali was already trending online, her sponsored bridal gown teaser racking up millions of likes. "Send my regrets," I said, and killed the feed. The screen went dark, reflecting back a version of myself I barely recognised. Wind-chapped cheeks, hair pulled into a practical braid, the ghost of a smirk tugging at my lips. Dana leaned against the doorway, holding 2 mugs of something steaming. Trouble in paradise? I took the proffered drink, letting the heat sear my palms. Not my paradise, not my trouble. Somewhere beyond the ice, my family was unravelling, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't there to stitch them back together. The coffee tasted bitter, perfect. The supply ship wasn't due for another 6 weeks. Yet, there it was, a dark smudge on the horizon, cutting through the pack ice with unnatural determination. The radio crackled to life before I could even grab my parka. "McMurdo Station, this is the MV Orlova requesting docking clearance." Dana's eyebrows shot up as she tossed me the binoculars. "Since when do tourist boats push through the Ross Sea this late in the season?" The answer came into focus through the lenses. My father's unmistakable silhouette on the bridge, shoulders squared in his ridiculous Canada Goose expedition jacket, the one he'd bought for that ill-fated safari Camilla had Instagrammed into oblivion. Behind him, my mother's petite frame bobbed anxiously, her designer sunglasses utterly useless against the glare of the ice. And then, of course, Camilla, swaddled in what appeared to be a white mink coat, waving at the landscape like she'd just spotted penguins. My coffee turned to acid in my stomach. The station manager burst into the comms room, his face flushed. "There's a CNN crew on that ship and, Christ, some reality TV producer screaming about family reconciliation in extreme conditions." I reached for the radio. "MV Orlova, be advised our docking bay can't accommodate vessels your size." Static. Then, my father's voice smooth as aged whiskey. "We've arranged a Zodiac transfer. Expect us in 20 minutes. The audacity should have been impressive. Instead, I found myself marvelling at their desperation, the lengths they'd go to now that the world was watching. Dana shoved a survival kit into my hands. "You could always hide in the cryo lab." I stared at the approaching dot of the inflatable boat. "No, let them come." The wind bit at any exposed skin as I waited on the ice pier. They made quite the spectacle, my father attempting to disembark with corporate gravitas, while the Zodiac bucked beneath him, my mother shrieking as an errant wave soaked her $1,000 boots, Camilla nearly capsizing them all when she stood for a hero shot with the station in the background. Then, finally, they were there. Real. Not pixels on a screen or voices through static, but flesh and blood and poor life choices shivering before me. Camilla recovered first. "Surprise!" she trilled, arms outstretched like she expected me to rush into them. Her false eyelashes were already frosting over. My father cleared his throat. "We felt it was important to—" "Hold on." I pulled out my satellite phone, hit record, and pointed it at them. "Say that again. For posterity." His smile faltered. Behind him, the CNN camera crew jostled for position, their lens caps still on. The station's alarm klaxon chose that moment to blare, a mechanical scream that sent the film crew scrambling. Dana's voice crackled over the PA. "All personnel, emergency weather protocol, whiteout conditions incoming." I pocketed my phone. "You should go." My mother actually stamped her foot. "We came all this way." A gust of wind sent Camilla's fur coat billowing like a parachute. As she wrestled with it, I leaned close enough to smell her signature jasmine perfume, now undercut with brine and panic. "Here's the thing," I said, my voice barely audible over the rising storm. "You wanted a show? This isn't it." I nodded toward the Zodiac, now straining against its moorings. "Last boat leaves in 5. The first stinging pellets of snow hit as they argued amongst themselves. My father's corporate mask slipped entirely when the station's security team began herding the camera crew back to the dock. "Damn it," he hissed, grabbing my arm. "Just tell us what you want." I pried his fingers off one by one. "I wanted you to stay away." The storm swallowed their retreat whole. Camilla's fur-coated silhouette, my mother's protests, my father's impotent rage, until there was nothing left but white. Back inside, Dana handed me a fresh coffee. "Well?" I watched the Orlova's lights disappear into the blizzard. "Tell the team we're brewing a fresh batch tomorrow. Double strength." Somewhere out there, my family was learning a fundamental truth. Antarctica doesn't do second chances, and neither do I. They came prepared this time. No cameras, no production crew, just the 3 of them waiting outside the meteorology lab like ghosts haunting my new life. My father's knuckles rapping sharply against the reinforced glass, my mother's breath fogging the pain as she peered inside, Camilla shifting from foot to foot in boots clearly never meant for actual polar conditions. I could have walked away, should have by every logical measure, but something primal uncoiled in my chest at the sight of them standing there, vulnerable for once, on my territory. The door hissed shut behind me as I stepped onto the observation deck. The cold was different today. Not the usual biting wind, but a still, surgical chill that made every word hang visible in the air between us. My father spoke first. "We're not leaving until we talk." "Talk?" I glanced at the emergency beacon blinking red near the fuel depot. "Or stage another spectacle?" Camilla flinched. "Good." My mother reached for me, her glove brushing my sleeve. "You're being unreasonable." The laugh that escaped me sounded alien even to my own ears. "Unreasonable? You chartered a fucking icebreaker because CNN wasn't returning your calls." For once, no one had a polished rebuttal. The truth settled over us like the fine snow dusting their shoulders. My father's shoulders sagged. An imperceptible shift. But I'd spent a lifetime studying his towels. "The company's failing," he admitted, the words clearly costing him. "The investors don't care about your pride," I finished. The irony was almost poetic. Polaris crumbling without me while I stood here surrounded by the most stable infrastructure on the continent. Camilla sniffled, her nose red under caked foundation. "Everyone thinks we're monsters." I studied her, really studied her, for the first time in years. The perfect social media veneer had cracks now. Her lip filler had migrated slightly, her eyelash extensions were uneven. The realization hit me like a gust of katabatic wind. She was just as trapped as I'd been. "You are," I said quietly. But so was I. Just quieter about it. The silence that followed was absolute. No wind, no generators. Just 4 people finally hearing each other for the first time. My father opened his mouth. To apologize, to bargain, but the station alarm cut him off. Storm warning. I turned toward the safety of the heated corridors. "Your Zodiac leaves in 10 minutes. No one followed. The cold didn't feel like poison anymore. It felt clean. Final. The Zodiac's engine coughed to life, the sound carrying across the ice like a dying animal. I watched from the observation deck as they boarded, my father steadying my mother with one arm while Camilla clutched her ruined coat around her shoulders. No grand exit, no dramatic last words. Just 3 diminished figures swallowed by the vast, indifferent landscape. Dana materialized beside me, pressing a steaming mug into my hands. Regrets? I watched the boat shrink into the distance, its wake scarring the pristine water for only a moment before the sea erased all traces. Not a single one. The truth settled deeper than the cold ever could. They had come expecting a fight, a negotiation, some grand emotional climax worthy of cameras. Instead, they got silence, the one thing they'd never given me. My satellite phone buzzed in my pocket, another message blinking on the screen. Not from them, a venture capital firm offering triple my original valuation for the patents. I deleted it without reading. Somewhere beyond the ice, their world would keep turning. Camilla would spin this into content. My father would find another angle. My mother would dab her eyes at charity luncheons. But here, the generators hummed, the auroras danced, the ice stretched on, endless and unconcerned. Dana clinked her mug against mine. To fresh starts. I took a sip, letting the warmth spread through my chest. No more begging for scraps of attention. No more twisting myself into shapes that fit their narrative. Just the work. The ice. The quiet, unshakable certainty of my own worth. The boat disappeared over the horizon. I didn't wave. The emails kept coming. Not just from investors now, but universities, research foundations, even a Nobel laureate who wanted to discuss my glacial energy adaptations. Each ping of the satellite uplink felt like another thread snapping from the noose I hadn't realised was still around my neck. I let them pile up in my inbox like snowdrifts while I worked, rebuilding the West Array's thermal regulators, recalibrating the seismographs, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind clear. The station crew gave me space, though I caught them watching sometimes when they thought I wasn't looking. Dana broke the silence one evening as we sorted supply manifests. You know you don't have to stay here forever, right? The question startled me. Not because I hadn't considered leaving, but because I'd never framed it as a choice rather than an exile. Outside, the midnight sun cast long shadows across the ice. Somewhere beyond that horizon, my patents were sparking, bidding wars. My family was probably giving carefully curated interviews about respecting boundaries. Camilla had likely already trademarked Antarctic Sister for her next merch line. And me. I ran a finger along the edge of the workbench, the nicks and scars from years of repairs. I'm not hiding, I said at last. Dana just nodded. She knew what I meant. The truth was simpler than anyone wanted to believe. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't waiting for some grand apology or dramatic reunion. I'd simply found a place where the air didn't taste like disappointment, where my value wasn't something to be debated over dinner tables or boardrooms. When the UN Environment Programme's offer came, lead engineer on their global renewable energy initiative, I didn't hesitate. Not because it was an escape, but because it was mine. I packed lightly. The crew threw an impromptu send-off in the mess hall, complete with vodka chilled in a snowbank and a cake shaped like a solar panel. No speeches, no tears, just the quiet understanding of people who'd seen each other through storms. As the transport plane's engines roared to life, I pressed my palm against the frozen window. The ice stretched endlessly below, beautiful and indifferent. Some endings aren't explosions. They're the slow, inevitable melt of things that were never built to last. The plane lifted into the endless white sky. I didn't look back. The knock came just past midnight in my Oslo apartment, 3 sharp raps that sent my coffee cup rattling on its saucer. Through the peephole, Camilla stood shivering in an absurdly thin jacket, her usually flawless makeup smudged beneath bloodshot eyes. She looked smaller without an entourage. I considered not opening the door, but something in her hunched shoulders reminded me of that Zodiac ride back to the ship, the way the ice had made everyone equally fragile. "Before you say anything," she blurted when I finally turned the knob, "I paid for my own ticket this time." The apartment smelled of bergamot and old books as she hovered near the radiator, clutching a tea she hadn't touched. No camera crew, no prepared speeches, just the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sniffle she tried to mask. "They're divorcing," she said finally, staring into her cup. "Dad's moving to Singapore with his assistant. Mom's checking into some Swiss clinic." I watched a snowflake melt on her boot. All those years of orchestrated family photos, the carefully crafted narrative of perfection, reduced to this shaky voice in my kitchen. She didn't ask for money, didn't pitch a reconciliation documentary, just sat there, stripped bare of pretense for the first time in her life. When she reached for her bag to leave, I surprised us both. "There's a guest room." The words hung between us, not forgiveness, not even truce, just space. Camilla exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath for decades. "It's weird," she murmured, not being the favourite anymore. Outside, the northern lights shimmered green over the fjord. Somewhere beneath them, the ice kept shifting. So did we. The Aurora Initiative headquarters hummed with a different energy than Polaris ever had. No boardroom politics, no desperate investor pitches, just the steady pulse of meaningful work. My office window framed Oslo's harbour, where supply ships came and went, their hulls filled with solar converters bound for villages the energy grid had forgotten. Camilla appeared in the doorway holding 2 coffees, her once manicured nails now short and paint-free. "The Kenyan delegation loved your microgrid prototype," she said, setting down a cup. "Also, you have spinach in your teeth from lunch." I smirked, wiping my mouth. Some things never changed. She'd surprised everyone, least of all herself. What began as a temporary stay had evolved into something unexpected, a talent for cutting through bureaucratic nonsense, for translating engineering jargon into viral social campaigns. The Antarctic sister persona had been replaced by honest posts about energy poverty that actually moved the needle. Dana video called from McMurdo every Sunday, her face pixelated but her smirk clear. "Never thought I'd miss your disaster repairs," she'd say, before launching into updates about the upgraded arrays. Today, as I signed off on the final Greenland deployment, my phone buzzed with a familiar unknown number. Not my father, he'd stopped calling after the Singapore move, but my mother, her Swiss treatment apparently complete. The message contained just 2 words. "Proud of you." I deleted it without responding, but found myself smiling anyway. Camilla leaned against the doorframe, watching the sunset paint the fjord gold. "We got another grant request. Small village in Patagonia." I grabbed my jacket. "Tell them we're coming." The helicopter blades thrummed overhead as we loaded the prototype gear. Below us, the city glittered like a circuit board coming to life. Not the glitter of Camilla's old influencer parties, but something brighter, more real. She buckled her harness with practiced hands. "Remember when you said you'd never work with family again?" The engine roar swallowed my laugh as we lifted off. The world stretched out beneath us. Ice and ocean, cities and villages, all those places waiting to be lit. Turns out, some bridges don't need rebuilding. You just build better ones.